Hey guys. Wow, I lost my nerve when the first dozen people came in, and now there's like a dozen people trying to come in. So, point number one is I'm not a public speaker, and if I look a little bit nervous, it's because I'm absolutely petrified. However, we'll get through this together. This is my talk, Offensive Anti-Analysis, or what should probably more accurately be called Adventures in Antivirus Evasion Part 3. I've done quite a lot of work over the past maybe 2 years on antivirus evasion, and this is kind of the end of it. I've got through everything now. I've talked about as much as I want to. So here's a nice summary, the TLDR of me messing around with antivirus. So I am the author of that Pink Information Security blog that these slides are themed around. I write a lot of content online about penetration testing. Penetration testing is my day job, breaking into computers and buildings. And I write about infrastructure security, web application security, but something that I don't talk about is what I would call my hobby, which is malicious software development. Yeah, not really analysis, it's kind of more development. So, because I'm not allowed to do a talk on, hey, here's a tutorial on how to write a botnet, I'm going to do a tutorial on how to evade antivirus instead. Now, antivirus has been around for a long time, and I'll talk about the origins of antivirus very, very briefly, and I'll talk about the kind of previous works through, evading signature analysis and things like that very briefly. And I want to get onto behavioral analysis engines towards the end, and in particular, online scanning engines like VirusTotal and websites like that. But starting right at the beginning, one of the problems with malicious software, and one of the problems with detecting malicious software, is it's really hard to determine, what is malicious? Define malicious. And if we can't accurately define it, then we can't accurately detect it. So if I want to know what something looks like, I'll go, hey, okay, Google, what's a horse look like? And Google will show me images of a horse, and I'll go, yeah, man, those are definitely horses. Look at those stunning beasts. Easy. Apart from when it comes to the kind of stuff that we do, I introduce myself as a penetration tester. Sometimes I'll use the slang term hacker. Oh, I'm a professional hacker. I break into computers and buildings and stuff like that. Siri, what's a hacker look like? Oh, so we have a problem here. We have a problem when it comes to stereotypes, and we have a problem when it comes to actually defining the thing that we're looking for. If we can't define malicious, we can't detect malicious. So, yeah, Google Images is probably not the best place to go if you're looking for rigorous definitions, but it's a good place to start. Now, I'm a penetration tester. I hail from the red team, and for those who are unfamiliar, information security is generally split into red team and blue team, where the blue team are the defenders, people who look after our network infrastructure and keep us safe online, and the red team are the people who play the part of the attacker. They're not malicious in nature, they just play devil's advocate for the sake of network security. So, when it comes to being a member of Red Team, we have an ethics boundary, and in fact anyone in information security can talk to the ends of the world about ethics. And where I draw the line here is, yeah, I'm going to talk about malicious software development, but anything that we do should and always must assist the blue team more than it assists the malicious citizens of the internet. So I wrote some tools, and I wrote some proof of concepts, and I'll release those. I was going to demo them during this talk, but we're on cable number 7 and laptop number 2, so I'm not entirely convinced demos will happen, I'm afraid. But I wrote some malware, and it did some cool things to some antivirus scanners, and I want to talk about that. And my relationship with malware is a pretty simple one. I really like malware. I really like malicious software, and I don't differentiate between the tools that I use in my day job, hacking tools, and malicious software, because they're doing the same jobs for the same reason. I just have a certificate of ethics that says when I steal your credit cards, I'm going to give them back. Most of them. So we're talking about detecting viruses, detecting worms, detecting malware. What's a virus look like? Yeah, man, this Google Images thing's really not working out for us, is it? Tell you what, we'll check out some documentaries instead. This is CSI Cyber. Turns out it's really easy, guys. You just look for the red code. It's all of the red. That's the malware. Now, yeah, man, detecting malware, detecting Well, detecting a malware attack is really, really simple. You turn your laptop on and it looks like that, and then you go, yep, that's malware. That's definitely malware. So it's 2016, and our headlines today are filled with ransomware. Ransomware is a pretty awesome thing. It's, well, it's a really, really easy way of making money, isn't it? And you see, ransomware is hitting the news in 2016, but it's not news, it's not new. A quick pause, a quick detour. 1971, the first computer virus is released. I'm talking about Creeper here, and by computer virus, we're talking about PDP-10s and the ARPANET. Creeper creeps through the ARPANET, infecting machines. And then Reaper is released, and Reaper chases Creeper through the ARPANET and cleans it up. So 1971, and we have the first virus and the first antivirus. That is a long time ago. Do you remember the 70s? So 1971, that's the first computer virus. 1986, that's Brain. That's the first PC virus. PCs as we would recognize them in this day and age, IBM PCs. 1986. 1989, the first ransomware. Talking about the AIDS Trojan here. A piece of software that will encrypt the files on your computer and then ask you to pay a ransom. Ransomware. In 1989, it wasn't perfect. It used symmetric key cryptography as opposed to asymmetric key cryptography. So any malware analysts out there will tell you that that's terrible. You can pull a key out of the executable. It's trivially easy to bypass. But hey, it was 1989. We were young. Some of us were. I was born in 1990. Malware, and specifically ransomware, has been a problem longer than I have. So why is ransomware such a big thing in this day? Why is ransomware working out so well for the attackers? Well, partly you could argue improvements in certain areas of security, improvements in perimeter security, things like that. Alternatively, you could argue take asymmetric key cryptography, take malicious, throw in a little Bitcoin, and you have a recipe for profit. What kind of profits? Well, taking a quick look on Wikipedia, the source of all facts. Yeah, that's right, I don't only get my facts from Google Images. CryptoLocker, they made $3 million. That's pretty good. You're not buying a new car with $3 million, you're buying an island. CryptoWall, they made $18 million. I'm really sorry, this presentation's kind of, I'm not trying to convince you to write malware. That's not the aim of this. The aim of this topic is an incoherent 45-minute rant about some parts of information security that frustrate me. You see, malware's been around for a long time. Our advances in defending against malware have been around for a long time, and we do some really cool stuff. Malware analysts put an awful lot of effort into pulling these tools apart and writing quite fantastic blog posts about how naive malware is and how a lot of it is written like all software is. It's copy and pasted from Stack Overflow. I don't have the slide in here because I didn't want to steal someone else's work, but there's a brilliant article where a guy takes a piece of malware, pulls it apart, it's written in BASIC, and instead of talking about the features of the malware, he links it back to the original Stack Overflow articles, if that's the right word. It's like, yeah, this is copy and pasted from here, and then that's like copy and pasted from there. So the malware analysts, the antivirus companies, are doing absolutely next-gen stuff to detect this. And then the malware writers are just like, I'm not even going to learn my programming language, I'm just going to use other people's snippets. So ransomware is very, very strange. Malware is very, very strange, and it is absolutely all over the news. I set this as an animation originally, but the problem was it wasted about 7 minutes of just news headlines just coming up. They're deep, they're deep. Ransomware is great because it gets around a lot of the problems of traditional security. I don't have to do things like breaching the perimeter, and I don't have to hack hardened servers and get into the areas that we've invested in to protect. I just have to get a user to click a link in an email, and I work as a penetration tester, so sending phishing emails is something that I do quite regularly. And my, I guess, personal average, or my team's average, is 33% of users will give us their password over email. That's not a Gartner statistic. I can't link that back to a report. It's our personal experiences, our statistics and team. Around 50% of users will click a link, and around 30% of users will give us their passwords. Now, it's not going to be as trivial as, hey bro, what's your password? Or, oh, I lost my password, can I borrow yours? We're going to set up a scenario, we're going to set up, we're going to use psychology against users, and that's the brilliant thing. I'm not attacking a hardened server, I'm attacking a user who's non-techie, probably really busy, doesn't really care about computers, in fact probably hates them as much as I do, and just wants to get done with the task that's set before him. So phishing attacks are effective, link ransomware to phishing attacks, and they're very effective. Now, in the context of computer security, we opened with this problem, and this is the problem that runs throughout. How do we define malicious? Now, there's security devices out there that'll detect vulnerability exploitation and detect things like privilege escalation. And again, ransomware is getting around those because we're taking a user's files that they have permission to and messing with them in the context of that user. The user has clicked a link in an email, something like that. A piece of software running as that user is messing with that user's files. It's a different approach to security, something we've never really come across before. Ransomware, it's a type of malware. We have anti-malware. It's existed for a long time. I've previously written about it. Like I said, really this talk is Adventures in Antivirus Evasion Part 3. And when it comes to anti-malware systems, there's two types of engine, and most people in the room are familiar with both of these terms and the fact that there's two types. If you read any of the vendors' pamphlets, any of their information, they'll tell you there's 7 types, but it's like the 7 signs of aging. Trust me, there's two detection engines. The signature analysis engines, which everyone should know, hopefully if you're in IT and you're at a security conference, should know. These are pretty broken. They do have a place though. They do exist for a reason. A signature engine is less computationally expensive than a behavioral analysis engine is. If the signature engine gets a detection, you don't need to worry about the time-consuming behavioral analysis scan. Now there's 2 kinds of behavioral engines really when you think about it, or 2 approaches to using them. There's whatever it is that you're deploying in your endpoint security, and then there's websites like this. So when I'm on a penetration test and I upload a tool to a server and I get command execution on a server, I don't have to bypass all of the antivirus in the world. I just have to bypass the one that you're using, whatever your endpoint choice is. I bypass that and it's really good. I'm good to go get my code execution. However, if we've got a really on-the-ball SOC, if anyone's ever met one, then I'm sorry, I shouldn't take the mic out of blue team. That's unfair. If we have a really on-the-ball SOC or a really on-the-ball sysadmin, and he picks up on this executable or this service, and he's like, that looks dodgy. You might choose to use a service like this. You might choose to upload it to VirusTotal to get effectively a second opinion about the security. So systems out there exist already to bypass antivirus. Things like the Veil framework, a fantastic framework that does what you need on a pen test, hooks well into Kali Linux if that's your flavor. And now we've got this second system where people are uploading tools to VirusTotal and things like that, and we have to evade those as well. The quick TLDR for signature analysis evasion, lots of different techniques. Quick Google, you find out about them. Don't bother with encoding, it's not going to get you anywhere. Autoerotic exploitation is as fun as its name suggests, but my personal favorite is crypting. Crypting is a really simple concept, really. It's a slang term from the dirty hacker underground. It's the idea that we pull the meat out of an executable, we encrypt it, add a decryption stub, stick it all back together again, and fire that as our payload. And now, a signature engine looks for previously seen patterns in an executable. If I encrypt the executable, there's no previously seen patterns, the signatures don't work. Really, really simple thing, really, really simple concept. Not quite so simple to write yourself. You're going to be knee-deep in assembly. And this talk is all about naive antivirus evasion. I've previously written about the technical side. I've got tutorials on there about assembly and things like that. And when it comes to conference talks, getting a slide filled with assembly and trying to route people through code doesn't work very well. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to say, yeah, antivirus evasion is still a thing 40 years after antivirus came out and 27 years after ransomware was invented. And also, a lot of the time, it's terrifyingly simple. So not going to pick on all vendors. I'm not going to pick on any vendor specifically. I'm just going to talk about some of the things that I did when I was messing around with the internet. One of them was I wanted to download a tool that was a good control group, a good hacking tool that should be detected by every antivirus out there. I chose Mimikatz for this round. It's a brilliant tool. Any penetration tester will tell you exactly what Mimikatz does. We absolutely love it. It pulls plain text credentials out of memory, a fantastic thing if you're a penetration tester. By default, it's detected 25 out of 56 on VirusTotal, a score of 25. Okay, point number one, that's terrifyingly low for an out-of-the-box. I haven't actually done any evasion yet, and I'm over halfway there. So that aside, what I did for my opening evasion technique, and this is naive lessons in antivirus evasion, step one, I renamed the file, and I went from 25 to 20. It's a good start. That's a 20% drop. So I started at below 50%, I dropped 20%. I am elite hacker, let's be honest. No, seriously. And eagle-eyed viewers, not at the back because there's no way you can even see this slide, but guys at the front might notice the hash is different. So I'm lying to you when I say I renamed the file. But not quite. I renamed the file and then went into the portable executable, and at the end of the PE structure it has a thing called original file name. It's also what it was previously called. I changed that as well. So I get a different hash, but yeah, I still renamed the file. Instead of going right-click rename, I opened it in a hex editor and renamed it. Basically the same thing. Not a difficult thing at all. But we're at 20 already, and we haven't really done a lot. Our target by the end of the day will be 0. Now, the problem with VirusTotal and the problem with playing around with the system, or I guess naive item number 2, a lot of people don't realize that although VirusTotal deploys a lot of antivirus engines, 57-ish engines, depending on which day you catch it on, it doesn't deploy the full capability of those scanners. So you might get a 0 score on the front page of VirusTotal and then deploy it on a penetration test or deploy it when you're pushing out your ransomware, making your millions, and it gets picked up. And that's frustrating, but we'll get around that in a second. For those that think I'm making that up, no, it's in their FAQ. They don't hide this fact. VirusTotal doesn't deploy the full capability of each scanning engine. Don't worry, you don't have to read that so that you can trust me. They just use command line versions of it. Deploy most of the signature engines, some of the behavioral engines. If you want VirusTotal's behavioral engine, there's a separate tab for it. So scanners on the front page, behavior on the 5th page. So we're going to start on the front page, bypass that. We're going to use crypting because it's pretty simple, and then we're going to look at the behavioral engine and mess with it. I'm going to tinker with it. So crypting, from that slide of like 7 different evasion techniques, crypting is the one that you're going to want to go with if you're doing antivirus evasion without actually learning how to program. If you're a ransomware author and you want to write ransomware entirely from Stack Overflow. So crypting is a really difficult thing to actually pull off, and it involves assembly and probably a difficult language to write like C. Brilliant thing is, someone's already done it for you. In fact, there's a lot of working examples out there. Good one at the bottom, hacked team. Hacking team graciously lent us their crypter, which is nice of them. The one in the middle, presumably not familiar with this, it's a tutorial, it's a full walkthrough, nine-page walkthrough on how to write a crypto, where they give you example code the whole way through, and then at the end they give you a working solution. Top one's another example of that. It's actually it compresses it, so it's a packer, not a crypto, but it's the same area. Takes an executable, modifies it in a way that an antivirus won't pick up signatures, and then you bypass the signature engine. Now, a crypto is going to allow you to bypass the signature engine quite well. These cryptos, however, those should be detected. Their decryption stubs should be picked up straight away. The reason for that is one of those is 13 years old. Now, it works just fine, actually. So we're at 25 originally, got it down to 20 by renaming the file, got it down to 12 by using a 13-year-old evasion tool. Antivirus is awesome, yo. So you download a tool, you don't even learn how to program, you run it, the tool's ancient, should be picked up, and it kind of is picked up, but so far we're almost all the way there in terms of antivirus evasion. We've not done anything lead. I'm sorry, were people expecting me to come in here and drop 0 days and stuff? I totally will when I need to. when evasion, when evasion is difficult. But there's still 12 detections to get through, and we're still going to continue on our naive evasion techniques. Let's take a look at some hex. Then we feel like real hackers. I opened a hex editor. I am Lee. So one of the problems, and one of the reasons that those 12 detections still exist, is the fact that although the signature engine can't take a look at the EXE and work out what the patterns are, what it can do is take a look at the EXE and say, that's encrypted, that looks weird. The way that it does this is it checks the entropy of each section, and if the entropy is particularly high, above 5 generally, for anyone who wants to get into the specifics, it goes, that's encrypted, I'd best flag it just in case. So how do we drop the entropy? Naive evasion step 3, throw a load of null bytes in there. That is 2 lines of C. Really sorry, I did say you don't have to learn any programming. You're going to have to find on Stack Overflow how to do a for loop. Let's do a for loop, stick some null bytes in there, and you get your detections down even further. So yeah, they're detecting the entropy, and that's all they can detect me on in that context from a signature analysis engine. Drop the entropy with null bytes, it's pretty easy. The next problem, though, is the fact that the behavioral engines are going to kick in now. We've successfully bypassed signature engines. This is not cool. We did this 10 years ago. Behavioral engine kicks in. If I encrypt my EXE, the behavioral engine executes it. It does dynamic analysis. It actually fires it up in a virtualized or emulated environment and watches it execute. So yeah, I hid the patterns, but as soon as the executable runs, they'll work out what it was. They'll work out that it, in fact, in this case, is mimikatz. So how do we get around the behavioral engines then? Well, we take a look at how they actually work, and we take a look at the, don't be mean to the vendors. They've got some difficult challenges, some difficult problems. It's a hard problem. One of the things that they're living with the reality of, they can only scan for a finite amount of time. So if I can stall the scanner long enough that, don't do anything malicious for the however long it scans for, I can evade them that way. A really good example of this is Google's Play Store, when they implemented their detection system there, dynamic analysis, called Bouncer. A researcher found out that if you just wait 5 minutes before doing anything malicious, it bypasses that protection mechanism. And the same is true of the behavioral engines that I see, apart from generally the ones that I work with. The timeout's a lot shorter. It's like 45 seconds on average. So the scanning engine chokes the EXE for 45 seconds. If it doesn't do anything bad, it lets it go through. So how do we stall for that time? Well, if I just did sleep 45 at the top of my EXE, obviously they're going to pick up on that. They're going to mess with the system because they're virtualizing or emulating. They have that benefit of they can increase the clock speed, they can jump forward a day, they can jump forward 7 days, things like that, mess around with our execution environment. I can't just stall for 45 seconds. One thing that I can do though, well, I encrypted my EXE. So instead of including the key in my executable, just brute force it at runtime. And then if they step forward, if they just go, oh, now it's tomorrow, now it's a week in the future, cool, still don't know what the password is, still got to keep going and working on that password. And again, this is an old technique. 2012, I think that technique came out. It's implemented in Hyperion. An academic paper was written. So again, a really naive way of getting around that. That was 10 lines of C, for anyone who's looking up the Stack Overflow article there. Take the password out, run another for loop. I'm sorry, 2 for loops in one day, I know. Brute force your own key, and then that way you guarantee that you've delayed execution for the amount of time. And in most cases, I evaded most antivirus doing that technique, again, like a 4-year-old technique. However, going back a second, 12 detections. 12 detections. Okay, we're almost all the way there, but 12 is still a high number. Got this Hyperion thing to play with, but 12, that's annoying me. Scroll down the page a little bit, and we've got the actual detections. This is VirusTotal I'm using here, but other scanner engines exist. VirusTotal tells you what you're being picked up for. Now, you won't be able to see it at the back, but those at the front, this is custom code that I've written that no one has seen before, and yet 6 of the engines gave it the exact same name. How did they all decide on the same name? They're all the same engine. It's not 12 scanning engines. Those 6, in this case, that's Bitdefender. So F-Secure used Bitdefender's antivirus engine. Again, they don't hide this fact. Read their FAQs, go on the forums, and they say that. Yes, We license Bitdefender, and F-Secure make their money on all of the awesome research that they do and the other things. Their value add isn't the engine, it's the things around the engine. Awesome company, one of my favorites, but naive item number 4 is the enemy isn't as numerous as we think they are. It's not 57 scanning engines that we're evading, it's small collections of them. And the way that we can bypass them is, through these simple little jumps where we're dropping out 5 at a time. And the reason we're dropping handfuls at a time is because we're just bypassing one of the engines. So if you couldn't read that forum post, I increased it here. This is F-Secure saying, yes, we use Bitdefender in our corporate products. Now, what I was doing originally, and what I was doing up to part 2 of this talk, where we've joined in now, is I was just arbitrarily messing with an executable to see if the detections went down. Trying things. Oh, I wonder if I rename it, will the detections go down? Oh yeah, they did, that's awesome. Just blindly changing things. And at this point, this is when I said, well, maybe I can use some of the penetration testing skills that I've got. Maybe I can take some of that red team knowledge and get a little bit more visibility into the engines. So taking a look at, again, VirusTotal, malware, those types of scanning engines. The virtualized systems, cloud-provided systems, software as a service. Previous work has been done on detecting and avoiding virtualized systems. I didn't do this. I specifically wanted to avoid scanners, not virtual systems. If you're a ransomware author, it doesn't matter. Yeah, argument. If you evade virtual systems, if your malware doesn't run on virtual servers, then you can't target the virtual servers that the IT company is deploying. Ransomware authors don't. They target the end devices, they target the humans. They don't go after the servers, they go after the doctors and the nurses in the offices, and that's how they make their money. So ransomware authors can do all of this cool stuff. They can apply all of this previous research, and there's a whole world of proof of concepts in here for them to do it. I'm a penetration tester, and sadly I do have to hack servers, so we're going to step past this section. But there's an awful lot of work already done for bypassing virtualization. Instead of bypassing virtualization, what I did was I took a look at some real-world scanning engines, and I wanted to detect when I'm being scanned by that engine and then not be malicious. Oh, I'm in VirusTotal. Okay, I'll be a good girl for a little while. So I took a look at a few engines, and they all worked in roughly the same way from the point of view of this. But another frustration with information security is there's a lot of techniques that have been deployed already that work. There's a lot of academic work out there to fix these problems. And all of these naive little jumps that I'm making shouldn't work. But what I did was, these systems are very, very strange. You've got remote command execution on VirusTotal. Of course you have. You give it an exe and it executes it. That's a strange starting point for a penetration tester. But all I need to do is detect when I'm being scanned. If I can detect when I'm being scanned, and better yet which scanning engine I'm in, I can not do my malicious behavior. Now the system isn't going to let me just export a list of, well, it's not going to let me map it. It's not going to say, oh, hey VirusTotal, can you give me a list of all of your files, all of your users, all of your running services, and any other information that you can think of, so that I can draw an accurate map of the scanner. They're going to block you from doing that in the same way that when you're doing a web application penetration test and you're exploiting SQL injection, the system might hide error messages from you, it might hide that kind of information. And blind SQL injection is a thing that's existed for a long time. Some people in the room who do web application testing right now are going to be like, why are we talking about SQL injection all of a sudden? Because the technique is the same. So the system won't let me just dump a whole list of files, but these systems do tell you the behavior that the executable took. They're like, oh, it created these files, it wrote these registry systems. So in the most naive of ways, I could just say, okay, try and create a file for every file that exists on the system. And then in the event log, I get an error. Oh, I tried to write all of these files, but I couldn't because those files exist. So that's one way of pulling it out. Alternatively, you could, ls a directory, get a list of files, encode them, pull them out that way. Or the hardest method would be to use Boolean inference, which is kind of the same thing we would do through SQL injection. I might take a value that I want to extract from a system, like the name of the current running user, and I'll say, oh, if the first letter of the current user is A, perform this action. If it's B, perform that action. If it's C, perform that action. And therefore, when I look at the output of the behavioral analysis engine, I can infer what these variables were. Now, the reason that I've given you all three of those options there, from the very simple, literally listing files, right down to Boolean inference, is the fact that this is a hard problem. So I'm saying that I can map these scanners, and I've written a tool that will say, hey, I'm VirusTotal, please don't do anything malicious. But the problem is difficult for them to fix. So, please don't be mean to the vendors. But however, I write a tool, it maps VirusTotal, it maps malware, it gives me a whole list of everything that's going on those systems. Yeah, let that one run overnight. That took a long time, especially the whole pulling things out character at a time thing. But you map the system, and then you don't give a demo, even though the slide says that I'm supposed to give a demo, because we're on laptop number 2 right now due to IT difficulties. If anyone wants to see the demo, however, I can show it later on and show some groups and things. There are some screenshots of the tool working, so we'll go through those instead. But I can achieve a 0 score in VirusTotal, and I can control what the output of the behavioral engine is. If I run the exe on my laptop, it does bad things. If I run it on VirusTotal, it doesn't do bad things. On malware or threat expert or any of the online scanning engines, all the same issue. So I can control what the IT admin sees, and I think that's a bad thing. Antivirus evasion is a bad thing. The ability to control a scanning engine is a bad thing. So I reported it to Google. I said, hey Google, bit of a vulnerability, it's a bit of a weird one. What I can do is I can evade your antivirus. And Google wrote back, you're never going to read that. Made it bigger, you're still probably not going to read that. How's that? So I said to VirusTotal, I can map your scanning engine, and using the map information, I can write a tool that will accurately detect that I am in your scanning engine, and therefore my malware won't perform any malicious behavior, and therefore it's not detected. Apparently that's supposed to happen. This is not a security vulnerability. I'm really sorry, guys. I pulled you in for a 40-minute talk about something that's not a security vulnerability. Yeah, I reckon it is. So what I can do is my tool that I did say I was going to release today, but I used 2-factor authentication and my phone died. So now I'm now locked out of the internet, which is a problem. I won't be on Twitter today. But I will release the code and the full write-up of everything I'm saying right now tonight, or whenever someone gets me an iPhone charger. But my tool, which is free for the open world, can detect not only if it's virtualized and which virtual system it's in. I'm lying here, it doesn't do Zen and QEMU yet because there's only so many hours in a day, but it can tell you when it's on VMware and when it's on VirtualBox, and it does that in the most naive of ways. It even supports wine. And that's cool. But like I said, that wasn't the priority this time around. If you want to write some ransomware, write some better code than I did. But it's a good proof of concept. What I was interested in is writing a tool that can detect when it's in a scanner and which scanner it's in. And it's pretty accurate. And that's a scary thing because it's terrifyingly naive. But it'll tell you if you're in a scanner, which scanner you're in, and then which node of that scanner you're in. So it's that accurate. It can differentiate between the nodes of the scanners. And I named them because I needed a unique way of identifying them. But it's that accurate that it can say, this executable is being fired on VirusTotal, and it does that by taking a look at the system. What's the name of the current user? What's the volume ID of the hard disk? This laptop's about to run out of power, so I'm going to talk a little bit quickly. It'll tell you what's the volume ID of the hard disk, what files exist, what files are on the desktop. Really, really trivially naive stuff. And it can tell you that it's in a scanner and which scanning node it's on. Which means that if I'm in a scanner, instead of doing malicious behavior, I can control what the output of that scanning engine is. And I can lie to the sysadmin and I can lie to the SOC. So the SOC finds my executable. It's like, this looks like a botnet, we'd best get it scanned. And this is what they get. Yeah, I can literally make it say anything I want to. So I'm going to be mean to them, I'm going to rickroll them. This is fear. That's it telling me which node I'm on. So there's a short number of nodes and it's saying, we're running on fear today. And it's on VirusTotal. So I can accurately detect when I'm on VirusTotal. Don't want to pick on one vendor though. This is VirusTotal. That's malware. That's threat expert. Works in the exact same way. Same naive level of detections. So if anyone wants to catch me later on and see the demo, that's awesome. If you don't have time, I'll release the proof of concepts and stuff tonight. You can catch those on the internet. My output from this conference talk is That's probably a bad thing. The fact that I can get a 0 output and the fact that I can control scanners is probably a bad thing. I'm really sorry that I lied to you though, because it's totes not. So that was my talk. That is offensive anti-analysis, a naive look